the Spirit of God is going to begin to do something in your heart and in your life. You're going to begin to see the joy of what it looks like to be a life-giving church. And all the kids who oftentimes we can get a little self-oriented are going to have some of that broken because they're going to see mom and dad saying, this is what life should be. This is how I should live. This is what a life-giving church looks like. Cortland, you were designed for a purpose to serve Cortland. Ithaca, you were designed for a purpose to serve Ithaca. Binghamton, you were designed for a purpose to serve Binghamton. Corning, you have a God-given purpose. And as we do that together, I believe it, I declare it, that the world is going to be transformed by a group of people who, when you looked at yourself, you said, I didn't belong. I don't have enough. I don't have the right stuff. Nobody else ever thought I was cool. Nobody else ever thought I had all the goods. I felt rejected every place I ever went to. But all of a sudden, you decided to invite. All of a sudden, you decided to choose real over cool. All of a sudden, you decided that you were going to give more than you take. All of a sudden, you decided that you were going to serve more than you were going to be served. And then out of you, there's a change that comes. Out of you, there's something that's released into the atmosphere. And out of you, people are going to meet Jesus.
Hey everybody, I want to welcome everyone at every single one of our locations in Binghamton, Cortland, Corning, Ithaca, and everybody joining us online. Can we put our hands together and just make everybody feel welcome? So good to have you here. We love you. I want you to know that I love you. I care about you. I am praying for you all of the time. I love when you turn in your prayer cards on the respond card. We get a chance to pray through those. In fact, you can go to Amen Corner on tworivers.church and you can help us pray through that, and you can actually sign up on the respond card to be a part of that prayer team. And so it's just so good. I'm excited about today. It's a really special day. In fact, I've got Crystal here to be able to share this moment. We're celebrating our 7-year anniversary as a church. Can we one more time just give it up and celebrate that? It is so good. And we're going to take a couple of moments today to really share the story, because if you really knew where God brought us from, then you'd be celebrating a little bit more too. And so it's so good to be able to look back at what God has done.
Yeah, so we've brought a couple pictures today that we get to show you of what it looked like when we were starting the church, and some of the small groups of people that were together with us when we started so many years ago when we set out with this dream. And so we're going to get a chance to take you on that journey with us today.
Yeah, so when we first moved to Binghamton, we wanted to be the kind of church that unchurched people would love to attend. In fact, one of the things that went off in my heart like a bomb when we first started to dream about the church, and when God started to give us this call to come and plant a church in New York, it was this idea that we were going to be a life-giving church. And so when we came to New York, we started to look at the stats and the data, and we realized that New York is one of the most unchurched regions in America. Now, that's kind of a weird thing to say, because when you drive around New York, you see like every time there's an intersection on some country road, there's a little church sitting on the corner of that. And so it's hard to think like, how could this be one of the most unchurched regions in America? It's just that in those churches, almost all of those churches are now empty, or they've aged out, or they're not reaching out. And so what's interesting is when we first came and we started the church 7 years ago, people would ask us, why are you starting another church? Almost like there's so many churches already. How could you possibly have another church? Like, where would that happen, or how could that even work? And the really short answer to that is that we felt like God had placed in our heart a vision to do church differently.
Yeah, so when we moved here, we did some specific things that God had put in our heart to do church differently. And so one of the things that we did when we moved here is we got a group of people together, a small group of people, because what's kind of funny is that when we came, we had a little list of people that we thought might want to help us start this church. And Will had gotten together with coffee with those people, and we went down that list. And he would always share the vision of what we had in our heart to do, start this church, do things differently, reach these people up in the Northeast. And he would always end the conversation with, would you help me? Would you be a part of this team? And it was funny because on that list, all those people that we got together with, what'd they all say?
No,
They
every
all
single one of them said no, yeah.
So we were like, yikes! And that's when our family started really helping us too. Thank goodness for our family. But anyways, we ended up starting to get a small group of people together. And one of the first things that we did as a group was we went and did surveys on the streets in Johnson City and in Binghamton. And we asked people, do you go to church? And if not, why? And so we got some really neat information. And we also got these little groups of people together to start advertising. And then not long after that, we had our first interest meeting for all the people that would want to start this church. And there's a picture of it, us at Grande's on Front Street. First little interest meeting with that group of people. We were stoked to have that many people in the room, right? 30 people. We were blown away. Look what God's doing. This is really going to happen. And then we actually ended up starting doing launch meetings, and about every other week we would meet together in the Shenango Town Hall, and we got about 35 crazy people together who had never heard Will preach, but they were signed on to help us start this church that was going to make a difference and reach people for Jesus in the Northeast.
Hey, do me a favor and say thank you to everybody that started this dream with us. Come on, can we put our hands together and say thank you? So good. It's amazing. You guys are awesome. Love. So many of you are still with us. It's amazing. In fact, you're kind of scattered around to the other locations. And so one of the things that we did when we set out to be a church that unchurched people would love to attend was we decided that we probably wanted to meet in an unconventional location. And so we thought, let's make Two Rivers Church relevant. Like one of the things that came back on the survey was people would say, look, the pastor talks about stuff that we don't care about. Church is boring. It's miserable. And so we thought, well, let's make it relevant. Let's make it enjoyable. Let's make it fun. And so we decided that if people were going to think this is a different type of church, then let's meet in a movie theater. And so one of the things that we did was we put out a launch flyer that went out to 30,000 homes, and we had people show up for the first Sunday. Over 300 people in attendance. Was a miracle thing that God did. And as I look back on that, and here we are now 7 years later, I just feel like God had sent us. One of the things that God spoke to me was, he said, I'm sending you to reap where you haven't sown. And one of the things that I've always tried to remember in that is that God has been the one doing this work, that God was going to build his church, and that it would be easy for me at some point along the way to try to take credit for what it is that God's doing. And I want you to look at this. It's found in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 10. It says, when God, your God, ushers you into the land that he promised through your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give you, you're going to walk into large, bustling cities that you didn't build. And that's literally like, I feel like what God has been doing at Two Rivers. There's facilities that we didn't build. There's things that God has done, well-furnished houses you didn't buy. You're going to come upon wells that you didn't dig, vineyards and olive orchards you didn't plant. And here's the part I want everybody to pay attention to. This is what I think we have to do. When you take it all in and settle down and you're pleased and content, make sure you don't forget. Everybody say, don't forget. Don't forget how you got there. And that's what I think we need to do right now as a church. Here we are celebrating 7 years. Here we are like, this is so amazing what God's doing. And I want us to remember what it is that God did to get us to this point. And so I think there's a few values that God put in my heart that I want us to remember. Because this is how we started the church. This is the culture that we created. And I think it's important for us to continue that, because that's the dream and the vision for what God said. If we're going to have a different kind of church, if we're going to have a church that reach unchurched people, there's a few things we're going to need to do that. And so number one, on your notes, everybody, you can write this down and fill in the blank. We are faith-filled, big thinking, bet the farm risk takers. That's the culture of who we have to be, what we have to be all about. And so I want you to write that down and fill in the blank there on your notes, because we're going to do anything short of sin to reach people who don't know Christ. We are all in kind of people. So as a church, I think one of the things that the value carries is that we're going to take seriously the command to go into all the world. Like, so many churches are talking about this idea, well, we're going to go into all the world, and they don't have any kind of plan. They don't have any kind of activity that's exhibited in their life that actually says, this is what we're doing to take over the world. I joke about it all the time, but the line from Animaniacs, Pinky and the Brain get together, and they say, what are we going to do today, Brain? And Brain says to Pinky, the same thing we do every day, Pinky. Try to take over the world. And that's literally what we've been about. We are faith-filled, big thinking. If we're going to actually take over the world, if we're actually going to do this thing, then it's going to have to be reflected back into our lives. And one of the biggest things that I realized was it was going to require big thinking and big faith in order to do that. Because the question we asked 8 years ago, really now, is that if we were the last church on earth, how would it change what we think about what we're supposed to be doing? So what it said to me was, we're not just going to transform one city. God's command to these small group of disciples was that they were actually supposed to go into the entire world. And those 11 men took that seriously, and they actually did it in their lives. And so we became, in our thinking, a movement rather than a church. We said we're going to be multipliers. We're going to do anything short of sin to reach people. And this is the kind of vision that requires big faith. Faith that says my God is going to come through. If he's called me to it, he's going to bring me through it. If it's his will, it's his bill. My God is able in every situation. I don't look at all the obstacles. I don't look at the size of the task. I look at the size of my God. So we have this bold vision. We have a big vision at Two Rivers Church. We exist to transform the world by leading people to Jesus. And so that requires a big God. And what happened was, when we started this church, we were told actually by the people around us to think smaller. That if we were going to have a church, like, don't expect 300 people on our first Sunday. We were supposed to expect maybe 100, and we were supposed to be in the most unchurched region in America, and these people aren't going to come to church, and these people don't have jobs, and these people aren't as educated, whatever. The list can go on and on and on for all the reasons why God couldn't do something amazing in our midst, and the reasons why we shouldn't believe that we could see the world transform. And I want you to know, in this past year, just this past year alone, we've seen over 394 first-time commitments to Christ, and we've celebrated with 243 people who've gone all in water baptism. Just this past year, this past Easter, we added Two Rivers Church Ithaca for our 4th location, and then we added number 5 with Gloversville. And so we are just celebrating like God is multiplying the church. There's so much to be like, God is doing this amazing thing. But it's because we are faith-filled, big thinking, bet the farm risk takers. We're going to do anything short of sin to reach people who don't know Jesus.
Oh, that is so good. That gets me so excited. And you know, one of the other values that we came with in our hearts and that we set out to do was we exist to serve those who are not yet a part of us. We are spiritual contributors, not spiritual consumers. We are the church, and we exist for the world. So Will and I have been a part of churches growing up, and we've seen this in churches. So many churches are kind of like social clubs, that they are very concerned about each other and each other's needs, which is great, except that they forget about the world around them, full of people who are far from God, who don't yet know a loving Savior. And so we just knew, moving to the Northeast, that we were commanded and we were on mission to be a church that was full of people who were concerned about all the people that weren't yet a part of us. Because we believe you can do both. Will says it a lot, that our God is not an or God, that he's an and God, that we can be concerned about each other and concerned about all the people that are not yet a part of us. And so we moved here with that purpose and that goal. And so it's kind of like the picture that we've had in our minds is that we are a fishing boat as a church, not a cruise ship. And so many churches, like I said, are kind of like cruise ships, where everything needs to be neat and clean all the time, and that there's just a few people doing the work. And we really believe in this thing that if people don't know Jesus, that they're not going to live in eternity. You know, we are on mission, and we are in critical times in the last days. And so we just really believe that as a church, that we all need to be working, that you all have value, you have worth, you have works that God's prepared for you. And so we set out to be a church that's full of contributors, that we come on Sunday, there are no throwaway Sundays. We come on Sunday ready to serve those who are coming in our doors, that as we're talking, we don't ever have our backs to the door, so that when new people come in, they see our backs. You know, we want to welcome new people in so that we have the opportunity for them to meet with Jesus. So that is the value, that we exist to serve those who are not yet a part of us. We set out to do that, and it's so exciting to see all of you still doing that at all of our locations. I know that our locations are full of servants who are coming ready to serve. And you know, there's a picture there of this group of guys who would come every Sunday morning when we were in the theater and that trailer, and they would come early and unload the trailer, set up all of our church, and then we would pack it up after church and put it all in the trailer. And we've come so far since those days, right? There's so many of us in our buildings that we don't have to set up and tear down. But, you know, we always want to remember where we've come from, because there are locations like Ithaca that are still doing that. And so the rest of us, even though we may not have to set up and tear down, we can serve by giving so that they can have them set up and tear down. And then also, there's someone in Ithaca right now who's sitting in a seat, and maybe one day you'll realize, man, I want to be a contributor too, and you will get up a little early and come to Ithaca and help set up and tear down. And so we love that value. We set out to do that. We are still doing it. And as we go into the future, we want to always be a church that is full of contributors and not consumers, that we exist for the world around us.
Yeah, it's such an important idea. And I think it's such a contrast where if we are going to be a different kind of church, I feel like there's a whole world of churches that are basically just kind of really selfish. They're coming, they think the church exists for me. Like the church, I'm going to sit in the seat, and if the pastor doesn't say the right words, if the greeter doesn't greet me the right way, if the coffee isn't a certain way, why, I'm going to take my valuable, precious body, and I'm going to move on to the next church. And I'm like, bye, bye, bye. Seriously, get out. Get out. If you're not going to help, get out of my way. There are people literally dying right now. And we are not existing for you to come and take up resources and I need your seat. I need your seat. And so you can go, like, get out. I don't want you. You're not part of our church. There's a church down the street for you. How many people are ever going to hear the pastor, like, tell them get out of their church? But that's our value. We got to remember where we've come from. And we're not going to, in year 7, all of a sudden transition into a church that is like everybody sitting around waiting to be served. That's not how it works. In fact, we have to be real. In fact, that's number 3. You can write this down in your notes. We are real people on real journeys. And so right from the gate, like, I don't know if you guys remember, there was the picture and it showed like this weird like a tin foil sort of shape. That was a spaceship. And in that launch team meeting, one of the things that we told people right out of the gate was that spaceship was going to launch, but the fuel, the thing that was going to make that ship kind of work, was 3 F words. Right from the gate, we said, if this thing's going to work at Two Rivers, we're going to have to practice 3 F words. And if you practice those 3 F words, it's going to keep you from the 4th F word. And so these are our 3 F words: fun, flexible, and forgiving. And I think every church has to be fun. It has to be like, if you're going to come into church, you don't have to put on this plastic face and be like, how are you today, brother? Well, everything's good. God bless you. Be at peace. And it's like, man, that's so annoying. I don't want to be around that. I want to be around people that are real. They're having fun. And then things are going to change. Like, we started out as this mobile church. We weren't even sure where we were going to be able to meet every single weekend. There was a week where one of our locations fell through, and we didn't even know where we were going to be the next Sunday. And so we just have to have flexibility, and you never know what's going to happen with the snow. We had Sundays where the guy that was supposed to bring the trailer to the church with all of the gear and all the equipment, like, slept in, and we're like, where is our stuff? How is this going to work? And so, yeah, we went off the road in the trailer. One time we showed up and the trailer had been robbed, and so all of our gear was gone. Flexibility is absolutely critical in almost any context in life. I love this phrase: blessed are the flexible, because they will bend and not break. And then this idea that we would be forgiving. And this is so huge, because I feel like people were willing to forgive unchurched people. But I have fought throughout the last 7 years for Christians to forgive Christians. Because we don't expect to have to, like, well, you're supposed to treat me good. You're supposed to do all of these things, and you're supposed to, and it was like we were holding Christians to a standard that's impossible. And so what we said was, we're going to be a real church for real people. And this was burning in my heart, because I'd spent years on staff in places where it was almost like if you came to church, you had to be fake. And I would talk to people and I would ask them, hey, how are you doing? And they'd be like, oh, things are great. Everything's so good. It's wonderful in my life. And then I find out, like, you're getting divorced. Like, your wife just left you, and there's like, why do you feel like you can't say what's going on in your life? And so it was super important for me that we be a church where real people can come. We're not going to reward perfection at Two Rivers Church. In fact, we celebrate grace. That we approach the throne of grace with boldness. We're going to reward humility. We're going to reward confession. We're going to reward the kind of church that can be the prodigal son. We like to tell people we're a Luke 15 church. And what Luke 15 is a chapter that's all about lost things. And this is Jesus' heart. Yeah. Jesus' heart, he said, I didn't come for the healthy. I came for the sick. We're not a club for the saved at Two Rivers. Crystal brought up this idea that we're a fishing boat and not a cruise ship. And I think a fishing boat is always smelly and messy because we're always catching new fish. Where in contrast, the cruise ship is clean and nice, but there's no room for new fish. And so I love it that when you come, and we've done this, we've created a culture where you can be real. And you can say, look, we like to say it this way, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay for you we're like, you could come just as you are. And what's so beautiful about that is not one of us wants to stay where we are. We don't come into a church that's like, okay, we're gonna pass over sin. The whole point is that if you're gonna do healing, if you're gonna see your life transformed, it's because I came in and I found a place that I could say, here's what's going on in my life. People aren't shocked. They're not like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And what's happening is as we come in and we can be who we are and come in dressed the way you are and come into a room where all of a sudden you feel accepted and loved. I'm going to tell you, just this past Sunday, I met a man who was a grown man who said, look, I walked into this place and I was expecting, I'm not even really sure, but I wasn't expecting what I found. I was immediately comfortable. I was immediately feeling welcome.
Amen.
And he said, I experienced something there, and tears started pouring down his cheeks. He's saying he experienced the presence of God in his life probably for the very first time. And so it's this beautiful thing how in this moment where instead of trying to be fake, we could be this church where it's full of real people. And what happens is we are a church, we've told people they'll leave Two Rivers or whatever the thing is.
Relapse or something.
Yeah, they'll have a moment where some of the old ways come back and kind of drag them back to where they came from. And then they feel like, I don't know if I can go back to church. I don't know if I can go back to the hospital. And what's so beautiful is we've been able to create this environment where when people go, they can come back and they realize, yes, I'm the prodigal son. And I know there's so many of you right now sitting in your seats. And for one reason or another, you've missed out on time at church. And the enemy tried to tell you that you could never come home, that you could never repent, that you could never go back through the doors. But what's happened is you're here today because there's a group of people that just said, hey, we value real. We are going to be a church where lost things can be found. We're going to be a church where the prodigal can come home again. And that's exactly what we're happening. And so here we are now 7 years in, and we're celebrating these ideas that we are going to be the kind of church that's faith-filled, big thinking, bet the farm risk takers. And I want to encourage you one more time to begin to actually put it into practice. Put it into practice that if you're going to follow God, God's going to come through for you. If you're a follower of Jesus, you need to do anything short of sin to reach people who don't know Christ. And then we exist to serve those who are not yet part of us. We are spiritual contributors. We're not spiritual consumers. It costs me something. I love to tell the pastors all the time that you don't get paid to be in ministry. You pay to be in ministry. And one of the things I love to tell people at Two Rivers is that every member is a minister. It's going to cost you to follow Christ. It's going to cost you if we're going to do this thing together. And I believe it, that over the next 7 years, we're going to see God do amazing things. We're going to see God continue to take us to places that we never dreamed of. There's going to be churches in Syracuse and in Scranton and in Albany and in Rochester, in Canandaigua. And there's going to be churches that go down into New York City and down into New Jersey and up into Maine. I don't know where God will take us. We're going to be planting churches in other parts of the world. And what's going to happen is some of you right now who are sitting in these seats are thinking, God, how could that ever happen? I don't know if you've got the right person. I'm so messed up. I've got a whole past. I've got all these things that disqualify me. But in the end, we are the church. And God didn't call perfect people, but he does qualify those he calls. And so whatever's happened in your life, you need to know right now that God is going to do more than you could ever imagine if you'll just say yes. And so finally, if we get together and we're real people on real journeys, experiencing the grace of God together, what will happen is transformation. Because we're going to practice our F words. Being fun, having flexibility, and then forgiving people. There's nothing better in all the world than to come into a life-giving environment and experience the grace and the love and the mercy of God. And so I want to just take a moment. I want to pray a prayer of blessing over every single life, because I believe that God's got better days ahead. And so if we will remember what God has done, and we commit ourselves to a few values as a church, we are going to see in the next years to come God do great things. Can you bow your heads with me? Jesus, I pray right now over this entire body in Gloversville, in Binghamton, Cortland, Corning, and Ithaca. God, I pray that every single person would begin to take on the mantle that you put onto Crystal in my life, that we would simply live it out every day, in every way. We would exist to bring you glory, to function in all that you called us to. God, I pray right now that you'd begin to activate people, that you would begin to call people, that even though we are in one of the most unchurched regions in America, we as a church are going to take ground, we're going to take territory, and God, I believe that's not just something that you're going to do through some sort of corporate thing, but that's happening individually in every single life. You're radically transforming us, and right now I believe that you're calling people, that you are setting people aside, that destinies are being reoriented to follow your call into the future. We thank you for it in Jesus' mighty name. Everybody said,
Amen.
Amen.
Amen.